Today we're going to be breaking down the match between Garry Tonon and Gilbert Burns from Polaris 4. So as the fight starts, Gilbert immediately shoots in on a double leg. And we'll just break that down real quick. So obviously Gilbert is the better wrestler, or is more likely to use wrestling in his jiu-jitsu, just with the MMA background. So as he shoots in on this double leg, which is timed very well, does a little bit of level changing, feels out Garry. He doesn't react on the first level change. So on the second level change, he decides to shoot. Now he comes in on double leg, but it's interesting here, because right here it looks like a pretty standard double leg. His right hand is a little high up on Garry's leg. It's closer towards the hip, where typically you want to be a little bit closer towards the knee. But as we move forward here, and he comes up, he still has that hand pretty high. Now, seemingly the reason is because he's going for the back, because he starts to circle around, keeping a tight waist grip. And he's circling, and Garry knows that he has a good position to attack his back, so he decides to sacrifice fall and regain a guard. Or somewhat of a guard. Alright, so they reset here in the middle of the mat. Gilbert's really working that side control position, trying to get a cross face, and Garry does a really good job of defending that cross face arm and is able to get into a butterfly guard. Gilbert easily passes and again goes right to that same position that he was just working in, and Garry immediately gets a hand on that cross face arm to prevent him from being flattened out, and is able to re-guard again. Now, an interesting series that happens just there. So we see this with a lot of the new wave team, is when they're in a position such as a seated guard, you see the collar tie paired with a hip heist. And usually they do that move and then wait to see what the reaction is going to be from the opponent. Depending on how the opponent reacts, they're able to either enter the legs or stand up. But in this case, instead of keeping that collar tie heavy and kind of just getting up on a knee, because Gilbert is pushing Garry's arm off of his head, and Garry does not have a tight collar tie, Garry just stands up. Now, this is an interesting position because Garry knows that his left or right leg is exposed for Gilbert to either do takedown or enter the legs, whatever the case is. So it almost seems like he's baiting this position here. Gilbert wraps up a tight waist, pulls that close side knee out, and again is going to that same series trying to attack the back. To defend, Garry rolls, and they're back in the side control position. Again, you see the exact same defense once Gilbert gets into side control. Garry's getting a 2-on-1 on the cross-face arm of Gilbert to prevent him from bringing that arm across and going behind his head, obviously to get into a cross-face position. And then as soon as he gets a good attachment, he uses that as a post, does a little shrimp out, and is able to re-guard. So you have a little bit of a heavier collar tie here, which is an important thing to see. Oops, back here. So in the previous situation that they were in this spot, Garry had let go of that collar tie and stood up. This time he keeps a stronger collar tie as he hip heists, and even though he does plant his leg back instead of staying on that knee and staying low, he's keeping this collar tie much heavier on the back of Gilbert's head, and Gilbert obviously didn't post his hand or push his hand off of his head, which allowed for the position to happen. But again, he's given that leg up. Garry's able to defend a little bit better than he had before. He circles, whereas before he stayed still. As soon as Gilbert gets this tight waist here, Garry's going to circle and do a more traditional takedown defense and stand back up. Some more hand fighting here. So Gilbert's shooting, but not as aggressively as he was before. I think he knows that Garry is finding something that he's seeing on those shots and is veering away from it for now. Alright, so we see our first attack from Garry, and he gets in on a leg entry. Almost an Imanari roll, but he's going to the same side leg versus the far side leg. So instead of doing a shot, he does an entry. Great job to get to a backside 50-50 position. But it's interesting here, he gets a good bite on the initial shot with his right arm to get a straight ankle type position or a straight ankle grip. But if you notice, his other arm stays relatively free and loose. And I think that that's exactly how Gilbert is able to pull out of this position so easily. So again, he has a shot, strong grip, and that arm right there is kind of loosey-goosey laying out here. Now, if he was able to secure a two-handed grip on the ankle, I think Gilbert would have a lot harder of a time pulling out of this, but since there's only one, and Gilbert's obviously an extremely strong dude, he just runs and rips his foot right out. Alright, so we have another double leg takedown. Now this time, it's a more traditional double leg, and if you notice here, as we're we're slow motioning, so Gilbert has a low grip close towards the knee of Garry with his left arm, and his right arm is somewhat high, but it's a lot lower than it had been on those first initial double leg attempts where his hand was more on his hip going for that tight waist. It's dropping down a little bit more, so he's going for a more traditional double leg takedown. And you can see right there, his hand actually enters high and then starts to slide down. So now that his hand is at the mid part of Garry's thigh versus being at his hip, he is preventing this leg from traveling in this direction. And as Gilbert starts to drive and move forward, Garry cannot defend it and winds up getting taken down. Nice trip by Gilbert. And he reset back in the middle. So we're fighting from a butterfly guard. Ooh, and Garry almost has a 411 entry here. So if we run this here. So again, this is a position that we're going to see a lot throughout this match. Garry secures a nice collar tie. Decides to hip heist up. Now notice, just as I was mentioning before, in the previous times that Garry had been doing this collar tie hip heist, he had been taking his back leg and standing up on his foot. And this time, as you can see, he has toes and knees on the mat, which allows him to have base and doesn't expose his front leg to be as easily attacked or entered in on by Gilbert. He locks up a whizzer here. And as he stands up, or as Gilbert decides to tight waist and stand up, Garry also follows. And he's setting himself up here for this 411 entry. So it's kind of like a flying 411 entry position where Garry has his one leg splitting Gilbert's. And what he's going to be able to do, if done correctly, is use the weight that he's leaning in on Gilbert up top to lighten this foot, raise it up and behind, and then lock up a figure 4 on the outside of Gilbert's leg. Now, when he tries to do that, Gilbert knows that this is coming and decides to move his leg out of the way. Now, I don't know if Garry didn't know this or if Gilbert was giving him some problems up top with leaning some weight in, so he's paying attention with that. You see he has a strong post hand here, but he does attempt to do that 411 entry and lifts this leg up to try to hook Gilbert's outside leg, but as we just said, Gilbert had already moved it. So that way when he does try to scoop and roll through, Gilbert's able to somewhat easily, impressively, cartwheel past and prevent the leg entry. Gilbert's going for a double underpass. Garry defends. And again, keep bringing this up, but as soon as Garry knows that Gilbert is passing his guard, his first priority is to get some sort of control on that cross-face hand. So if Gilbert is on, as we're viewing it, on the left side of Garry, his left arm is going to be that cross-face arm. So Garry knows immediately to get some sort of control on that arm. Now from this position, as we've seen Jiu-Jitsu evolve, this is almost a octopus-style guard that all the B-team guys are doing a lot. Craig Jones, but this is a position to where Garry can defend that cross-face arm. And back inside control. Garry has a lockdown position on Gilbert, which is a good control position from half guard, especially to prevent him from passing, but Gilbert just blasts through it. Guys get reset. Now it looks like Garry attempts to do a different leg entry from here. Oops, going forward, gotta go backwards. So instead of doing the collar tie and hip heisting, he decides to do a collar tie and try to shoot underneath and lift his butterfly hooks here to raise Gilbert's waist up in the air, make his legs light, and attack the legs that way. But Gilbert does a good job of switching his hips to smash that down and escapes. Nice scramble back up to the feet. Another double leg by Gilbert. Garry's able to get a knee in there and prevent him from getting side control again. Something interesting to note here, before we go into that, this is that same position. I'm telling you, this comes up so much in this match. Again, Garry has a butterfly style open guard where he gets a collar tie. He then hip heists up. Again, he's keeping his knee and his foot down, unlike what he was doing in the beginning when he was posting up fully. And he's allowing Gilbert to lean in with his weight a little bit more, which opens himself up for leg entries. Again, we see Garry gets his whizzer in. But instead of waiting for Gilbert to fully post, which I'm sure he thinks Gilbert knows that he's shooting for that, where Gilbert would put his leg back this way and he's going for that 411 entry, Garry decides to do a surprise and shoot a flying triangle, which he almost gets, to be honest, but Gilbert rips out. Another one by Garry, same exact flying triangle. Ooh, and Gilbert has a crafty escape and re-attack on the back. So off the failed attempt. He's trying to wrap up a shin-to-shin guard. And from here, Gilbert's going to post on his back to keep his weight down. And then he's going to swing this leg out behind and go for the back. But as soon as he does that, Garry knows and falls back and concedes a north-south. Again, Garry defending that cross-face arm. He does not want to be cross-faced and flattened out. That would be a really bad position for him. Gilbert's trying to pass his knee shield with a weave. And again, we see a very similar position where Garry is got his collar tie and stands up. Garry with a little bit of a leg entry attempt. Now it's interesting to note here that Gilbert was coming out hot and heavy, and even though we're only about 6 minutes into the match, he definitely seems slower than he did initially. So just something to note about how hot and heavy you come out into a match might be more advantageous to pace yourself like a lot of the guys from New Wave and B Team tend to do, well, used to do, instead of coming out super hot and heavy right away. Now Gilbert's obviously a little tired because he's not shooting in as aggressively as he was before. He's pretty hesitant. He's really feeling Garry out and making sure that he doesn't get caught in the leg attempt, and there you go. So this is the exact same entry that we saw before, that kind of Imanari roll, where he shoots in, gets a shirt ankle grip, posts away, gets into that backside 50-50 position. This time he has a stronger bite on the ankle, and Gilbert's not as energized, or doesn't have as much stamina as he did in the beginning of the match, so he's not able to just rip right through. And even though Garry still has this floating arm, which I still don't know why he wouldn't wrap up that second hand, just might be beyond my knowledge, but even with that single hand grip, is able to control, expose the heel. So he gets that straight ankle grip. In order for Gilbert to get out, he needs to fight the feet off of his hips and run this way. And as he does that, that exposes the heel. So Garry knows that that's the defense. So if you can see here, heel is hidden. Fast forward a couple frames. Boom. Heel is now exposed, which is what Garry wanted to do. But Gilbert rolls out of it and escapes. So obviously the standard defense to a heel hook is to roll with it, and if the offensive player can't roll fast enough or to keep up with you, you're going to get out or blow a knee. So again, it looks like the fatigue's really setting in here. Gilbert's not really coming at Garry like he was in the beginning. He's doing a lot more defensive wrestling, where he's doing some hand posts. He's grip fighting and allowing Garry to kind of just sit in. Okay, so here we have the exact same position that we're seeing this entire match. We have a modified or progressed hip heist type position from the collar tie, where Garry has his whizzer in and he's trying to split the legs of Gilbert Burns so that he is able to hook this leg up and back while flying this leg around, getting into that 411 position. But instead he tries to attack the other leg and actually gets pretty deep in on a heel hook, but again, Gilbert's able to roll and escape. So at this point, Gilbert knows that Garry's hunting for his legs and is getting in on both the short and far side. Ooh. So he had a couple different options here, but from this position, Garry is shooting his right leg through and using this foot to plant and raise his hips up towards the sky, his butt up to the sky. And what that's going to do, it's going to open up a potential 411 entry. So boom. Okay, so right here, Garry has the outside position on Gilbert's leg, and with this foot or this leg here, all he has to do is curl it in this way, and he can lock up the 411 with that leg there. And he almost has it here, it looks like, at least, but he's really focused on that other leg. So I think he understood that Gilbert might know that this leg would be exposed, so he was baiting him to react. And again, with his hips splayed this far apart, now that allows for an easier entry to start attacking Gilbert's right leg. But Gilbert's able to escape. Ref's just resetting them, wants to make sure that they have everything in the right position. Right. Gilbert explodes out and has his own leg entry, and he gets in deep on this attack right here with his toe hold. I really thought he had it right there, so we can break that down real quick. It was pretty deep. We'll break down that whole sequence. All right, so we have Gilbert exploding out here, standard. And then as Garry is coming into attack, Gilbert sees that he's basically in the position that Garry's been in this whole time. Now, he doesn't have the collar tie here, which affects things, but he's hip heisted. Garry is coming this way with his attack, which means that his legs are open to be entered on. So it actually looks like he tries to stand up here, and Garry's just pushing forward too much. But Gilbert immediately knows that with that momentum, he needs to get butterflies in and elevate, which he does here. And as soon as he elevates, the legs of Garry Tonon are exposed and able to be attacked. So Gilbert goes into a single leg X guard here, and I think he's looking for a heel initially. So he looks like he's getting that wrist to wrist grip, but Garry's defending it well, and he knows that he can't get heel exposure in this position. His legs are jammed up, not in an ideal position to roll Garry, so he transitions for the toe hold. Now again, he's got a decent bite right here, but as soon as he extends back, this is when I thought he had him. So to my view, Gilbert had done everything correctly. Now Garry tries to roll with it. Gilbert's rolling with him, and as soon as he lets go of that leg blocking Garry's hip from rolling this way, he then re-rolls this way in an attempt to escape. It's a little crafty escape by Garry. Watch, as soon as he reaches over, Gilbert reaches over with his leg. Garry immediately rolls the other way. So he's rolling to his right. He lets go, rolls to his left. Boom. So when they're right here, this is a very deep toe hold. The only thing that I could think would make it stronger is if Gilbert was able to roll underneath a little bit more, so that Garry's inside of his knee was more pointing directly at his belly button versus down towards his leg. I think that would have been a little bit deeper of a bite, and it's actually interesting. Garry has I think it's called the inescapable toe hold, or the ultimate toe hold, which he outlines all the details that Gilbert's doing perfectly here, and I'll attach a link to that video just so you can check that out. But honestly, this is about as deep as you can get it. But it slips, and Garry is able to escape the position. And stand back up. I keep harping on this, but it's happening through the whole match. So in this position, again, Garry's not going for a traditional wrestling style takedown. He's getting a collar tie, and he's angling his hips perpendicular to Gilbert's hips, trying to do that 411 entry. So as you can see here, yep, right there. So he's got his hips, and he's gonna step in, and it looks like he's trying to get that inside leg to hook underneath and around so he can enter into 411, but Gilbert knows this, and he's going to circle to his right to prevent Garry from being able to do that entry. And then, just as we were seeing before, Gilbert uses that opportunity to try to tight waist and get to Garry's back. But Garry, just like in the initial sequence or the initial engagement, Garry concedes, falls, and just gets back to a position inside control. Again, Garry defending that cross face arm. And Gilbert has a good back attempt right here. Garry is fighting that leg to prevent the hook from coming in, so he's got a little bit of a cross body ride happening here. And Gilbert has to revert to a leg drag position since he could not take the back. Again, here's the exact same position we've been seeing this whole match. You have Garry with his whizzer, his leg splitting, Gilbert's in a hip heist type position. And boom. So finally, Garry gets a 411 position here. So he rolls, back steps, and locks it up. I guess this is almost like a backside 50-50 instead of a 411, but regardless, grabs the heel and finishes. So as you can see here, he's reaching, catches the heel right there. Gilbert tries to push out, but he can't. And that's the match.